Good morning, everyone. Tom Mariano here from New York State Wireless Association. We're just going to sit tight for another minute or two while we allow some other people to join. So just bear with us for another 60 seconds or so. Thank you. For those of you just joining in now, we're just waiting another 30 seconds or so just to allow our registrants and attendees to join. Okay, so we're going to get started. Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us. This is our fourth session in the series that we've been conducting as the joint webinar series between New Jersey Wireless Association and the New York State Wireless Association. We work very closely, the two organizations. We support each other on many of the events that we hold, on regulatory matters, and we're very, very happy to be presenting the convergence of public safety and commercial wireless systems. Let's go to the next slide. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. And I might ask anyone who hasn't muted their phone, you may want to do that at this point in time until, especially on the speaker side. Thanks. Okay, just a couple of notes. What you want to do is towards the end or during the presentations, you're going to want to use your Zoom control panel at the bottom of your screen for asking questions, and you'll see where that is. If you just move your cursor, you should be able to, you'll see it pop up for Q&A. Today's presentation slides will also be mailed out to all the attendees. And as always, we will have these posted with the video links to both of the websites, NYSWA.org and NJWA So you can also go there and you can see any of the existing webinars that we've conducted as well. Next slide, please. So on behalf of New Jersey Wireless Association, Dominic Valecco has given me authority to thank everyone. And certainly we know that there's a lot of crossover between the two organizations, but the gold sponsors are listed here for New Jersey Wireless Association. And I know this is extremely important to New Jersey Wireless Association. These annual sponsorships support the organization throughout the year. These are the silver and bronze as well. So please take note of who they are. Lastly, New York State Wireless Association does not do annual sponsorships. We are event sponsored. And today, Dynamic Environmental Associates has sponsored this particular webinar, and I want to thank them for doing so. A couple things about upcoming events. Cinco de Mayo, New Jersey Wireless Association is holding a networking event on the 5th of May at Top Golf in Edison. Registration is open. You can go to the website to register for it. I've been there before. It's a fantastic place, fantastic event. It's mostly outdoors, so I know social distancing and being outdoors will be accommodated. So great event to go to. In addition, NJWA is holding their golf outing at Forest Gate Country Club, which they held last year. Outdoors, great event, always is a great event. And again, that'll be on June 8th. And then New York State Wireless Association is still contemplating their golf outing in upstate New York. More to come on that, but I will tell you that the wireless forum that for 2019, 2017, we held in New York City will be held on October 21st, 2021 in Saratoga Springs. Sponsorships will be open by next week if they're not already, and so will registration. So keep an eye open for that. We're very excited about the space, the event location, not just being in Saratoga Springs, but the city center in Saratoga Springs. And there's some other just great events that will be going on for the wireless forum. So keep an eye open for that as well. Next slide. So with that, again, I'm very excited about this presentation today. The convergence of public safety and commercial wireless systems is something that many of us may not know a lot about, but believe me when I tell you it's up and coming. With that said, I want to introduce Dominic Valleco, the president of the New Jersey Wireless Association. He and I and our teams have been working very closely with our speakers today to put this together for you. Dominic Valleco, who I've known for a long time, Dominic, 30 years, did you say? Long
30,
time.
30 plus, Tom.
30 plus.
That's
right. I'll hand it off to you, Dominic. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for that introduction. And it is an absolute pleasure to work with New York State Wireless Association. As Tom said, our two organizations work very closely together. We've got a lot of overlap between our members, and as a result, we try to coordinate our activities. And it's just a pleasure working with Tom and that entire organization. Tom, I want to thank you for promoting our two upcoming events. And I have to say, too, I'm looking forward to this wireless forum in Saratoga Springs. I've been to the last couple in New York City at Chelsea Piers, and it's always been an amazing event. Great speakers, just a well attended and well-organized event. So, Tom, good luck with that. And I'm looking forward to being there in Saratoga Springs. So that's it should be a great event. So make sure everyone keeps an eye out for that. Always a well-attended event. I'd like to thank our two speakers. We've got two very good speakers today to talk about this very interesting, and as Tom had said, you're going to see more and more of this in the future. First speaker that we have is David Cook from FirstNet Authority. David's got over 45 years in emergency services. He's been in law enforcement, he's fire chief, EMT, and he was the director of public safety for Rensselaer County in New York. He founded the New York State 911 Coordinators Association and is the past vice president of the New York State Emergency Managers Association. He's the senior public safety advisor of the FirstNet Authority, which is essentially that in that position, he's the liaison between a project office in Reston, Virginia, and local governments and the responders in New Jersey, New York, Vermont, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I'd like to welcome David and look forward to his presentation. And I've known David for quite some time, and I think you're going to enjoy his presentation. I've worked with him on some other things, and he's a great guy. So I'm really happy to have you here, David. Thank you. And Mariano Aguirre from Motorola Solutions is our second speaker. Mariano is a key member of the Unified Communications Business Unit at Motorola Solutions. Now, he will tell you what Unified Communications means. And by the end of this presentation from both David and Mariano, I think that you will start to see where these things are going. Mariano is currently responsible for bringing innovative cloud-based interoperability and application program interface solutions to the market. He holds a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Texas and an MBA also from the University of Texas. So I look forward to, and I've seen Mariano's got a great presentation here as well. So we look forward to that, and hopefully we'll get some good questions out of that. So with that, what I'd like to do then is turn this over to David, and David can start with his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Dominic. It has been a pleasure working with you for many years now. Not quite as many as Tom, but we're pretty close. So as Dominic said, I'm going to discuss the FirstNet program, which actually stands for First Responder Network. That's the very beginning of our convergence between public safety communications and commercial communications. And Aaron, if you go to the next slide, we'll kick it off here. So the birth of FirstNet actually started back in the 2001 terrorist attacks, when 2,977 people perished because of some single event. Congress would like to know why. And what Congress did was they created the 9/11 Commission. Everyone can remember all the discussion about the commission looking into all sorts of details on the attacks, the prevention of the attacks, the recovery of the attacks afterwards. And one of the things that was identified was the very poor state of public safety communications and interoperability. We had our own land mobile radio systems. In many cases, they didn't talk to each other. They were restricted to voice communications. And the 9/11 Commission report very clearly showed that the public safety communications in the United States needed help. So between 2004 and 2012, every major public safety association and organization united and went to Congress with a single voice saying, help us fix our communications. And in 2012, the First Responder Network Authority was signed into law. We're not a pet project of some elected officials. We were founded in statute. They gave us money. They gave us billions of dollars. They gave us very special public safety grade frequencies that propagate very well. They're very clear. They told us to go forth and to fix the issue, and that's the only charge that the authority has, is to provide a nationwide public safety broadband network that all emergency responders in the country are able to sign on if they want to. The law says we have to build the network out. It doesn't say anybody has to use it. The only way somebody is going to use FirstNet is if it's better than what they have today. So we went out between 2012 and 2015 and asked thousands of agencies and thousands of experts, what do we need to do to create a nationwide network? We created a RFP that was objective based. It wasn't technology based. We didn't tell any of the bidders how to do it. We told them what we needed to do when it's done. And through a very detailed federal procurement process, AT&T won the award to create the FirstNet network. And they started by putting together plans that were sent out to every state and territory. We have 56 states and territories in the United States. And every one of them received a dedicated plan on how AT&T was going to provide this public safety network. And the states and the territories were allowed to review those plans and either opt in and say yes, they wanted to participate, or opt out and say no, they would build it themselves. And every single state and territory liked the plan that was presented, and we were off to the races. Starting in 2019 and 2018, the system was kicked off, and it's a 25-year contract. So we're here for the next 25 years with one mission: to create a nationwide public safety network that's on broadband, which is a commercial program for emergency responders all across the country. Next slide, please. So when we were organized, they created us a little bit differently than your typical federal government program. We don't have a commissioner. We don't have a director that oversees the agency. We have a CEO, and the CEO reports to a FirstNet Authority board, a board of directors. And you'll see off to the left side there, the Public Safety Advisory Committee. I'm going to talk about them in a minute, but I want you to see how on this slide they report directly to the chain of command, and they have a very strong influence of what's going on over this whole network. And then down underneath are all the individual agencies that we need. The market engagement, that's where I come from. I'm engaging with the users, and we have a roadmap team that looks forward. What are we going to do in the future? And all of the other entities that you typically need to run a program. Next slide, Aaron. So here's our board of directors, and they're a little bit unique in themselves because they're experts, they're subject matter experts in their fields. They're appointed by the Secretary of Commerce, and the chairman that you see on the left-hand side there, his name is Robert Osterthaler, and he goes by Tip as a nickname. He's a former fighter pilot and a retired brigadier general with the United States Air Force. He was heavily engaged in communications overseas, including satellite communications. His vice chair, the guy right next to him, is Richard Carrizo. He's the chief of the Southern Platte Fire Protection District in Kansas City, Missouri. He's a fire chief, and he's our vice chair of the program. You'll see Neil Cox up there, and directly under him is David Zollett. Those guys have decades of telecom communications leadership experience. Katrina Holmes, Katrina in the top row there, she overhauled Washington, D.C.'s 911 system. And down at the bottom is Matt Slickard. He's the assistant chief from the Houston Police Department. So you can see that we have representatives of various industries, including finance, including telecommunications, including public safety, all reporting to the Secretary of Commerce and our CEO reporting to them. We also have a couple of mandatory federal programs that are represented: the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, and the Secretary of the Office of Management and Budget have permanent seats on the board as well, so that we fall within federal guidelines on spending processes. The next slide, Aaron. And the Public Safety Advisory Committee. These folks, there's about 40 of them right now. There's 44 on the slide up there. They advise the board of directors on things of very special details, such as policies or procedures, or maybe a territorial issue. There's tribal nations are represented on them. There are a very broad spectrum of public safety experts, and they have guidance for us, also founded in statute. These people aren't just by whim. The law created them that created us. So the whole program is a public safety route to ensure that this network goes forward, doing what public safety needs it to do, not what the commercial industry needs it to do. What an emergency responder in the street requires, our job is to try and get it delivered for him. The next slide, I'm going to tell you how we do that. So we have a public-private partnership. It's unique. There's not very many of them. And the FirstNet Authority brings to the program that public safety expertise. I'm an emergency responder. My colleagues are emergency responders. We can't climb a tower and tell AT&T how to put up an antenna. I don't have the foggiest idea, but I can tell them what the antenna's got to do once they put it up. So we bring oversight to the contract. It's a federal contract. We make sure AT&T lives to the letter of the law, and we bring in our own technical expertise on what the network needs to do to meet the requirements of today's emergency responders. And today's emergency responders communicate differently than our fathers did. They communicate differently than when I first started out. We didn't have broadband. We didn't have applications. I would never pick up a cell phone on an emergency scene because I didn't have one. Today, my whole life circles around that phone and broadband communications. AT&T brings the expertise on how to deliver it. They have the core, very secure core that's dedicated to emergency responders. They have the ability to prioritize who gets on the network and who doesn't. Children aren't allowed to come on here and play Candy Crush. Emergency responders have highest priority. They get access to it, guaranteed. That's part of the requirement. That's part of the contract. There's penalties if they don't deliver. And AT&T brings what? Their father was Alexander Graham Bell in the 1870s. How many years of experience is that in telecommunications? Not to mention over 250,000 employees. They're a big outfit, the largest telecommunications company in the world, working with one of the biggest governments in the world, and we're creating this dedicated network for emergency responders. Next slide, sir. So when we talk about FirstNet, it gets used three different ways. There's the FirstNet Authority, that's us, the federal program. There's the FirstNet Network, that's the towers, the core, the equipment. And then there's AT&T FirstNet, they're individuals that are participating in the program. So when you see or hear or read about FirstNet, you really got to pay a little bit of attention as to which one you're talking about. Is it the network, AT&T, or us? Just wanted to make it clear that that word gets used a lot. It refers to a whole lot of public safety communications. Okay, Aaron? One of the things I do is to go out and knock on doors and talk to emergency responders. The office I'm sitting in right now happens to be a police station in Hanover, New Hampshire. And we were up here talking about deployable equipment and how to boost communications for an incident if they don't have broadband access. So Our job, my job, is to engage with public safety and develop the ideas and the things that they need so that we can go back to our coffers and invest money in the industry to improve public safety communications in the broadband and the commercial world. It's done with public safety input. Next slide. And we've divided our program up into these 6 different, we call them domains, but they're areas of expertise that we subdivide and target. Now, the core and coverage are required by a contract from AT&T. You can't have a network without the core, the backbone of it. And certainly coverage is king. If you can't reach the network, your devices are useless. We know that. And it doesn't matter whose network you're on. If you can't reach it, it's no good. So setting those two aside, in emergency services, we need situational awareness. We need to know what's happening when and where, and we can't wait a long time to get that information. We have to have it immediately. So the requirement of taking some of the data that's available through the applications today and move them into the hands of the people, the decision makers, the commanders, that's called situational awareness, and we're trying to expedite how that's done in a coordinated manner. Voice communications are still what happens the most. You pick up your two-way radio when you're running into a building or you're chasing somebody down the street. You don't have time to push a lot of buttons on a phone. You speak, and the other people at the other end need to hear it clearly. And it has to come over right away without a lot of garble in it, and so on and so forth. And you can go through secure information. Everybody knows people are hacking into networks all the time. And the bottom one being user experience is if it doesn't work for the responder, it doesn't work. Next slide, sir. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a specific use case that we have where emergency services are migrating to new technology. And I want to talk about drones, unmanned aircraft vehicles, UAVs. We call them drones typically. Drones today are becoming very commonplace in the industry. And if you look at the slide, I put up there several different uses. There are more uses for drones in emergency services than I could take the time on this whole program to deliver to you. But on the left side, you see the delivery of an AED, an automatic defibrillator, carrying payloads, dropping life preservers, things of that nature is a whole new concept. You hear about UPS, you hear about Amazon and all those people. Well, in emergency services, we periodically need to drop something too. So the ability to do that and communicate with the device is very important. Putting a camera in the sky, the eye in the sky, we're going to talk about that in a little more detail shortly. But firefighting is something that's becoming new. Not only putting out a fire, but lighting a fire. Imagine a wildfire where there's high winds and you're trying to put a person into a gully or up on a hillside to start a backfire to burn out an area that's under control. And trying to get somebody up there to do it carrying torches, very, very dangerous. We can do it with a drone. You can set a drone up in the air and light a fire where you need to. No human life at risk. What a brilliant idea. And the artificial intelligence that allows us to now move drones in and out of things without worrying about colliding with them is a game changer. It's a whole new program. Next slide, Aaron. The artificial intelligence that allows us the built-in collision avoidance can put a drone where we can't put people. They can have a drone fly through a truss of a bridge and look to see if anything's cracked or corroded or whatever happens after an earthquake or a fire underneath it or whatever your imagination can come up with. We can put drones in places that people can't go and see very clearly. You can fly through a forest. You can track a car going down the road or a person or a child that falls into a stream and you're trying to find them as they're flowing away. You can put a drone and it will stay right on the target. You can't do that with people. And if a building collapses, you can go inside with infrared cameras with detectors and you don't even need lights. And you can see if there's a body, a warm spot or something, a fire starting, whatever have you, in places that people don't fit, just for situational awareness. Next slide. So let's look a little bit at an actual incident. We'll talk for a second on communications. So we have a fire and go ahead, Aaron. And we show up with our fire truck and the fire chief puts up his drone and the drone is now communicating with the controller. But at the same time, the drone is seeing and recording whatever its sensors are trained to do. It could be a gas detector, it could be a camera. We don't know what it is detecting, but we know it's collecting data and the data is going back to the controller. And now what do we do with it? It's no good if only one person sees it. That situational awareness is pretty well limited by the traditional communications that we have. But if we go to a device called an HDMI transmitter, it can send the signal out to about 1,000 feet, a couple thousand feet, maybe if we're in good terrain, to emergency people on the scene. And they can see exactly what the incident commander sees, but that's still a very small, limited group. How about if we tie that communications into the commercial broadband industry and we send it out over FirstNet to the internet? Now we can send it anywhere in the world that it needs to go. Emergency operations center, a hospital, a police station. We can take our on-scene situational awareness data and share it with the people that need it immediately. Game changers. Totally new experience. Next slide. So we moved on pretty quick, but I just wanted to say that the ability for emergency services to communicate today, going from 4G to 5G, from land mobile radio to broadband, and the applications that are built into our phones today is giving us a whole new ability to protect the public. Dominic, thank you.
David, thank you for that excellent presentation, and pretty interesting stuff about the especially like with the drones. That's amazing, and I'm sure it gives first responders tools that you've never had in the past. And I know that these LMR, these land mobile radio networks, while they have a very specific and very important use, could not do what you've shown on some of these things. And so having this set of tools in your toolbox is just an amazing thing. And I think more people need to see this. Part of the reason we have this presentation, but more people need to see this because you really get to see, what the government's doing, what your taxes are paying for, and how this can not only improve quality of life, but save lives as well. Our next speaker, Mariano Aguirre, he from Motorola. I've already given him the intro. He's going to talk a little more about some of these applications and sort of expand on what David's talked about as well. So Mariano, take it over.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to talk about a little bit about the carriers. I'm also going to talk about devices and some of the applications that actually work between both LMR and the LTE networks. First of all, disclaimer, I'm with Motorola Solutions. I do not speak on behalf of AT&T, FirstNet, or Verizon. These are my own opinions based on my experience. So let's start with the first one, QPP. You're going to hear this term a lot. I think it's important that you understand what it means. There's a lot of marketing fluff that's coming out of different vendors and suppliers. So I wanted to give you an intro on what it means. QPP stands for quality of service, priority, and preemption. Quality of service, you can think of it as the number of lanes on a highway. It's the bandwidth that you get for your device or application. Priority is whether you're able to get on the highway as you're coming on board. And preemption is basically all the cars moving to the side to let you pass. So those three things combined is what gives LTE networks like FirstNet the ability to provide you a better user experience on your device in a high quality of service compared to like a commercial service. So let me jump into BAM 14 because this is connected. David talked about the deployment of FirstNet and how it got created. Initially, FirstNet was only going to be about band 14, which is about 20 megahertz of bandwidth, which is a pretty significant block. But with all the different video applications, drones, you can quickly use that 20 megahertz bandwidth. So one of the things that AT&T did when they won the bid to build FirstNet is that they actually pull in their commercial bandwidth into FirstNet. So and they actually prioritize users on their commercial bandwidth, and we're talking about over 150 megahertz of bandwidth. So that allowed FirstNet to quickly launched before you had all of the Band 14 sites built. So that's still ongoing. So you have this hybrid model where you have dedicated bandwidth combined with commercial bandwidth. So how do you make sure that your device, if you're a first responder, is not competing with commercial bandwidth? Well, that's through QPP. When you buy the FirstNet service, you get a special SIM card that goes on your device, and that tells the device that they're working at a higher level of QPP. Let me speak about Verizon. Verizon does something similar. They offer higher QPP for first responders, for the public safety community. The difference between FirstNet and Verizon is that Verizon is using only their commercial spectrum for this. So it's not a hybrid model. They don't have a dedicated spectrum that's just for public safety. So that's a big difference there. There are different types of QPP, and you should be aware of them. First of all, there's what we call static QPP and dynamic QPP. So typically, when you get that FirstNet SIM card and you put it on your device now is working at a higher level of QPP or priority, and that's static. And what that means is that if you have you have some kind of application running that you use for your agency on a daily basis, and you also have something like Facebook, they both get in the same level of QPP, higher than commercial. So you're always going to get there before a commercial user. There's something else called application QPP or dynamic QPP. As far as I know, as of today, none of the carriers, both FirstNet and Verizon, have deployed dynamic QPP. Now, the exception is services like MCPTT, push to talk, everything that has to do with voice. They do put you on a higher static QPP. So that's always going to have a higher level of priority on the network. But if you have an application that, for example, a man down type of application that needs to get higher than the other ones, that's where dynamic QPP would come into play. That's something that the carriers are looking at implementing in the future. It's not something that's enabled. Some may argue that static QPP is actually pretty good and high enough already, that you may not need that dynamic component. So just some terminology so that you're aware of what's going on. Next slide, please. So let me talk about devices now. And specifically, we have, at Motorola, we have a couple of devices that are actually leveraging the FirstNet network, as well as the Verizon public safety offer. This is the Apex Next. It's a P25 compatible radio that also has an LTE chipset on it. And we use the LTE component for several things. We use it for backup on the voice side. So if you run out of P25 coverage, the radio would automatically switch to FirstNet, for example, if you have the FirstNet SIM card on it. It will automatically switch, and it's transparent to the user. You don't have to change the knob. You don't have to change any channels. And voice, it's actually getting routed through the FirstNet LTE network, and then back to your P25 system. So everybody else that's still on a P25 talk group can listen to that person that's out of range. It's great for backing up voice. One of the things that is really helpful as well is situational awareness. So if you guys are don't know this, with radios, when you enable GPS location so that you can locate a first responder, GPS is really taxing. It's very expensive to do on LMR frequencies. It takes a lot of bandwidth. It actually takes capacity away from the P25 system. What we've done with this radio is we use the LTE connection to send GPS updates. And that way our applications that handle situational awareness can have the location of the user, and you can actually increase the frequency of updates without impacting the LMR system. So this is a great use case where both LMR and LTE are working together to give you a better experience. We do the same with messaging. So the radio has the ability to do messaging, and we leverage, again, the LTE side. So we offload the LMR network so that the LMR network can do what it's best at, which is mission critical voice. Some of the new applications that are have come with this radio are voice recognition applications. So we call it Vicky. Think of it as a Alexa or Siri, but Vicky is designed specifically to handle first responder commands. The commands are actually going through the LTE network again, going and hitting our cloud server that handles all the requests. So it's very important for all of this to work that you're using a network that has high QPP. Otherwise, the services wouldn't be reliable. Next slide. In addition to a portable, we have a partnership with Sierra Wireless. So they provide also an LTE-enabled modem. It's FirstNet certified. And these modems are used in patrol cars, for example. They actually help backhaul the traffic from mobile radios, the same way as the portable works. If you go out of P25 coverage, the mobile radio in a vehicle can actually route the traffic to the Sierra Wireless modem and use the FirstNet LTE network to keep the voice going. So you're always connected. So you can think of it as another backup solution. Those modems can serve as a Wi-Fi hotspot, or they can be wired into the mobile device. We have additional software that Motorola built into those modems to make sure that the traffic from the mobile devices is prioritized over traffic from other applications that may be running on that same modem. One of the advantages as well of using the LTE network on both vehicle repeaters and the portables is the programming aspect. As you know, when dealing with fleet maps, they're usually, you create your fleet map and you don't touch it for years. One of the reasons is that every time you want to change or add new talk groups, change anything on those radios, that usually means that you have to bring in first responders into a location, take the radio, reprogram it. We have the ability to do that over LMR networks, but it's pretty slow. Again, it takes capacity away from the system. So the LTE network gives us the ability to do programming over the air on the fly, and it takes seconds to do that. So you can reprogram your fleet at a mass scale when you're leveraging the LTE network. Next slide. And finally, let me talk about applications. We have several applications that are leveraging that LTE connectivity. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I'll give you some examples. We have a platform called Critical Connect, and Critical Connect is an interoperability in the cloud system that allows us to connect our P25 systems together. It allows us to connect those P25 systems with broadband push-to-talk devices that are running on that high-enabled QPP device, FirstNet device, or Verizon device. So you're able to have a smartphone that's running high-priority push-to-talk and talk to P25 radio through our Critical Connect platform. The platform carries voice as well as data components. So we were able to bring in location and messaging together. We're merging basically the radio with the smartphone devices into one talk group. We have other solutions like our COMMANDCENTRAL Aware application. This is a CAD type of application that allows you to do situational awareness, as well as pulling video from fixed cameras or cameras mounted on vehicles. And you can do this on demand. So we have cameras that that can stream through that modem that I showed you before. Some of them may have LTE built-in devices that are speaking through the FirstNet LTE network and stream that video back to the Aware application. Another interesting application that we have is our community engagement, where when a city deploys this application, the citizens themselves can download an app and send tips. Something is broken or there's a crime going on, and we process all that information and make sure that it flows into 911 dispatchers and police dispatchers that are using our solutions. So some of the solutions will use LTE as the backhaul. Some of the applications will be sitting at a command center where they have wireline backhaul. But what we're seeing as well is customers want to have backup, and they want to have backup to their wireline links. They're using FirstNet LTE as backup to LMR sites. They're using it as backup to 911 centers. So it's not just applications, but it's for pure data of different types of systems and networks. And that's all. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mariano, for that. We're going to go into the Q&A session. I've got a couple questions for both you and David, and we certainly welcome questions from our viewing audience. So let me start off with David, if I could. David, you and I have talked about this before. The public safety has had broadband for some time, but in fact, it's had broadband going back to 3G. But it's been limited use, limited rollout, limited applications, that type of thing. And with the FirstNet push by the government after 9/11, after everything that you had shown there, to me, that was the real catalyst for where we've seen this accelerated convergence. So my first question to you is what do you see as the most common applications of this technology currently, and then how do you see that changing in the future?
So applications is a good area to dig a little into, Dominic, because pretty much if you can imagine something, there's somebody building an application to do that. And on FirstNet right now, I believe there's 150 or 160 different applications that are available for emergency responders. And some of them allow dispatch centers to send alerts directly to a phone. We used to have to carry little pagers on our hips. Some of that is going away now, and your phone is becoming your alert device. Certainly mapping and cameras and everything else is very common. But One of the things that Mariano mentioned was the convergence of the land mobile radio and the broadband into one device. And that can go both ways, if you will, because if you have an application such as Enhanced Push to Talk or FirstNet Push to Talk, you can turn your phone into a radio. And then if you consider a responder who maybe can't afford a full two-way radio, they can put that application together and have a radio system over their phone. Or what if we were to connect the land mobile radio and the commercial networks together? Then you can have a whole new spectrum of opportunities, because you can talk between networks. You got to have coverage in your own network, but you could talk from one side of the country to another on a portable phone to a portable radio and have crystal clear communications. The number of applications that are taking off, it's skyrocketing, and we're just kind of riding that rail right now. It's there's a lot, and I just see more and more becoming available in the future as responders push their needs forward, and vendors are eager to meet the needs of public safety today. So this is a good program.
Good. Thank you. Well, it's interesting because several times you've mentioned, when you run out of P25 coverage, and Mariano's mentioned that as well. And I don't know that a lot of people realize this, but oftentimes these land mobile radio networks, or LMRs, networks as they're called, P25 usually, they're usually done on a jurisdictional basis, and they're built on a jurisdictional basis. So, for example, like in New Jersey, it's mostly done on a county basis. So what happens is the county, and then from an FCC licensing standpoint, it's done on a county basis, which means you can extend beyond the county to some extent with your signal, but not too far, because someone else needs to use those frequencies again and avoid interference, that type of thing. So when you get into a mutual aid situation where you've got maybe firefighters or police departments on both sides of that border, and there happens to be an incident that's very close to the border, you need people from both sides coming in typically, especially if it's a big event. And several times, like I said, both you and Mariano have said this, immediately it gives that interoperability or the ability to communicate, I'll say, from different networks, if you will, but the networks are tied together. So that's, to me, that's very powerful. All right, good. Mariano, I've got a question for you. Which products and applications do you see, being from Motorola as a vendor that supplies these products, which ones do you see that seem to garner the most interest, at least at this point in time, from the public safety community? And then, similar to the question I asked David, do you get requests for future applications? Obviously, I don't want to have you discuss anything that's proprietary or confidential from Motorola that you might be working on, but what are some of the requests that you see that you can talk about of where these first responders just can realize even greater benefits from these networks?
Yeah, no, those are good questions. I think it all comes down to 3 items. First one is voice. So that voice convergence that you're speaking of, the ability for their phones to be able to talk to the radio. So we're getting a lot of interest in that. And we do have a platform called Critical Connect that actually links the two, and it links the FirstNet Solutions to P25 systems. The other one is situational awareness. As I mentioned, there's always been a challenge because it's very expensive to do GPS updates over an LMR network, and those that do it basically have to buy more LMR channels, which is can be expensive. And it's very easy to do on an LTE network, right? And you can increase the updates. Frequency of updates is something critical when you're designing a situational awareness platform. Believe it or not, if you're doing updates every 3 seconds, now you're impacting the battery of the device, right? So you go down to 1 second, that that device may not last you through a whole shift. So there's all kinds of algorithms and techniques to try and preserve battery life. But as the systems get better and LTE helps in that, situational awareness is growing a lot, especially in the command center, the command central rooms. And then video, video's exploding, especially with the ability to stream video from fixed cameras at a school, right? That somebody in public safety can see inside a hallway from a camera that's installed there, to cameras that are on vehicles, the ability for dispatchers to pull that video and see what's happening in real time, as well as drones, right? So those are the three that are, I think, the most asked, right? Voice convergence, situational awareness, and video capabilities.
All right, great. Thank you very much. David, I'm going to go back to you. Actually, I'm going to give you two questions that came in from our viewing audience. First one's from Megan Riley. I think I know the answer to this, and I think it's a very quick answer. When you say first responders, are you referring to both paid and volunteer alike?
That's a very good question. The answer is absolutely.
That's what I thought the answer was. And the second question is, and similar question, how does an entity engage with FirstNet, and what are the cost considerations?
So that's an easy question to answer as well. I can't speak to the cost considerations because that's an AT&T pricing schedule. Engaging with either the authority or with AT&T FirstNet is very easy to do, and there's a lot of ways to do it. If you wish to engage with the authority to give us input or to be part of a focus group when we're trying to learn something and we're seeking input, that can be done simply by going to firstnet.gov. Firstnet.gov is the federal side of the aisle. Firstnet.com is the AT&T solution. And you can also go into any AT&T retail store, and they can connect you right with FirstNet information right at the store immediately. And I believe the last slide that we have towards the end coming up has my contact information. I would certainly encourage anyone with any questions that don't get answered, please follow up with me directly.
Great. Thank you, David. I'm just going to do a couple more questions here really quick because we're coming up on 53 minutes, and we like to keep our webinars focused and keep them, very focused and keep people participating. Mariano, you had mentioned that Motorola, as well as other LMR vendors, have the products that include band 14, FirstNet. You had also mentioned that your products have Verizon's band 13. And the question really is what challenges are associated with adding a technology like this to these hardened devices?
Yeah, good question. And I'm not the RF expert, but I can tell you what I've heard is some of the initial challenges have been on interference between the narrowband P25 channels and LTE, and a lot of those have been solved. But at the beginning, it was a big challenge, especially on P25. You have VHF, UHF, but especially have the 700 and 800 megahertz spectrum bands, and specifically on 700 and 800, there were quite a few initial challenges, making sure that we were not interfering with the LTE side, and also the LTE sides interfering with the 700 public safety channels, because band 14 is actually right there in the middle of the 700 spectrum. Some of that has been solved. I think one of the challenges that you hear on the LTE side, to have a device that's complete and that could replace LMR radio, is stuck around mode. And that's always going to be a limitation, right? An LMR radio if you lose the network, the P25 network, you can always count on switching the knob and putting that radio in what's called talk around mode, where it's transmitting from radio to radio, and those radios have 3 watts of power. There's nothing that exists today yet on the LTE side to be able to do that, and the solutions that they're talking about usually consist of less than a watt of power, which would limit the range significantly. So that's another challenge when it comes to talk around on LTE. LTE is a network, the client-centric architecture.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, David. I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm gonna wrap 2 questions together for you, if I could. One is specific to our audience here in the states of New Jersey and New York. My first question is, how is FirstNet engaged with our 2 states? And the second question is, we've talked before about this with 4G and 5G, and you make some notes about that in your presentation. Having a technology partner like AT&T, how does that help you with a migration to something like 5G, say, as compared to what it would typically take a government agency to migrate technology?
Good questions. So I think I'll start with the last question first. And having AT&T on board was a game changer. As Mariano said in the very beginning, AT&T came to the table and put their entire existing infrastructure, $180 billion worth of towers and transmission equipment and everything else on the table so that public safety could sign up the day we signed the contract and get priority and preemption. We thought it would take us years to build out a nationwide network and put band 14 across the country, and AT&T did it with a swipe of a pen. Not the band 14, but the ability for emergency responders to have priority access to broadband. So considering that they have all the retail stores and 250,000 people, it has been crucial to have them as a partner to allow public safety rapid access to broadband. Very critical, good partner. They're ahead of schedule on the build out, and things are going very, very well. So how is New York and New Jersey engaged? I meet with individuals in both New York and New Jersey on a regular basis, all the way from the state, from the Office of Homeland Securities, right on down to a local fire chief or a police station like I'm sitting in here today. They're progressing very well in New York and New Jersey. And one of the things that I thought about, Dominic, after you mentioned the question from about volunteer versus career, when somebody dials 911, they want police, fire, and EMS. And then police, fire, and EMS go out. We call them a primary responder. They go out and they do their thing, and they may need help. Who do they call for help, and how do they get the help that they need, like a snowplow in Buffalo or a tow truck on the New Jersey Turnpike or a tree cutter anywhere in the country? We call those extended primaries. So not only is FirstNet available for emergency responders, but it's also available for the people that emergency responders rely on to clear up an incident. And I have to say, the cooperation between the governments and the responders in New York and New Jersey has been outstanding. And I want to wrap up again by thanking you for the opportunity to participate here and share the word on how things are going. It's an important program, and we appreciate your support.
Well, great. Thank you, David, and thank you, Mariano. I'd like to again thank our sponsors, the event sponsor today for New York State Wireless and New Jersey Wireless's annual sponsors. A plug for New Jersey Wireless. We're still holding our annual sponsorship drive, so feel free to log on to newjerseywireless.org if you're interested in becoming one of our annual sponsors. Details will be coming soon regarding our next webinar in our series. And I'd like to thank all of our attendees today. And I'd like to thank especially our 2 speakers today. So thank you very much. And everyone have a good day. We're wrapping up here on the hour. Thank you.